So a secret about Ethan Linder is he can make your topic sound incredible. So well done, Ethan, for writing today's topic. I went and I took the title of today and I put it into Google Slides, and this is what came up. Okay, which is great. That's what I typed in. That's what showed up. My personality is like, oh, I don't really like that font. I don't really like capital letters. I'd rather it look like this. It has been said to me before, Julia, when you don't use capital letters, we can't take you serious. And so when I text people, that used to be the way. And so I changed my habits, and now I use capital letters. But my personality would prefer it look like this, just because it seems a little bit more fun. We just have, lowercase letters. As you think this morning of the words that you wrote down and what the actual title is, I'm curious what question came out of this morning for you as why you came. When you thought about coming on Saturday morning at 10 a.m., maybe it was the donuts, you can be honest with yourself. Maybe it was the coffee. Maybe it was being in a room with people. Why did you come? What is the question this morning that you're hoping to answer in your own personal life? You don't need to share these with your table. We'll have an opportunity for people to share if they want, but you don't need to. But write that down. Why did you come today? And again, these papers are for you. I'm not going to collect them. I'll go ahead and tell you my why today. Because I believe that we belong together because we're made in the image of the triune God. I believe that God intended, am I out of the range? I believe that God intended for us to function in harmony with God, with earth, and with each other, as well as with ourselves. So often, though, when I am dysregulated or not following the values that I have, it affects the people around me. Some of you in this room I've never met before. Others of you I've known for a couple decades. So there's a spectrum of people who know me in this process. And so in this, I want to communicate that that's the why for me today. If any of you follow me on social media, I posted this picture earlier this week, and I walked into a colleague's office, and this light was over the shadow, and I kept thinking, gosh, that seems really congruent to where we are, even as a nation, as a world, that there's a shadow over what it looks like for us to understand that we belong together. Today, as we're engaging in this process, I want us to think about Simon Sinek. He's a researcher. 2009, if you're not familiar with him, he's on YouTube. There's a great 13-minute video on the golden circle. So today, this is the model we're going to follow. Some of you might have come in wondering today, how am I going to have a better schedule? What do I do to make a better structure to my day? I hope there's some points that might feel helpful for you in that. We're going to spend some time, though, before we get into those pieces of your why. Why are you doing what you do? Why are you engaging in that process? And then how do you engage in your process? And then what are you doing? And that's the outcome. As a society, we've gotten really comfortable with what it looks like for us just to say, like, what's the outcome? What's the outcome? What's the outcome? But if it's not connected to our why, what's the purpose behind that? Does anyone want to say or share what they wrote down as to what they thought we were going to talk about today, why they came, what that looked like? Maybe one or two people feel comfortable sharing that. Yes, Heather, thanks. Time and priority. So Heather is time and priority. How do I engage in those? Thank you for that. Someone else? Yes. What's your name? Tina. Perfect. Identifying values. I don't even know Tina, and she's setting us up for what we're going to get into exactly. How do I identify? What do I value? So thank you for that, Tina. as we navigate throughout Scripture, we see a lot of time that God is talking about the belief or the theology of why we do something, and then the practice of it. So there's some of you in the room that are like, I want to leave with resources. I'll show you resources at the end as well, but this book is called Sit, Walk, Stand. It's by Watchman Nee, and it's about the book of Ephesians and talking about the reality of how do I engage sitting, walking, standing. How do I live out my beliefs in that? So for those resource people here, I'll have all those at the end too. But how do we engage our orthodoxy, the theory of what we believe, the doctrine of what we believe, and our orthopraxy? How do we practice this? So why does harmony matter? How do you engage your time? And what do you value? That's what I hope you walk away with today, as we engage in deeper places of that. This word in Greek, not Greek, Hebrew. Do we have any Hebrew scholars in the room who want to identify this word? This is the word shalom. Shalom is used all throughout Scripture to mean peace. At the beginning of the garden, there was harmony in the garden. There was peace. Sometimes when I think about peace, I just think about this like, no one's talking and I'm sitting in quiet. But how often is that peace actually a place where we flourish? That there's work to be done to engage that. I think sometimes we think, I just want 21 to be peaceful. What does it look like for us to engage in that space? If you could tell me today I could go anywhere, I would probably choose this as one of my top options. This is my aunt and uncle's house who live in Columbus. Anyone familiar with Columbus, Ohio? Columbus, Ohio is the home of the Ohio State University, and they live 1 mile from Ohio State University. Yet they live in a ravine, so walking into their house is still. They have floor-to-ceiling windows. It's kind of hard to capture. My uncle's an architect, and I was trying to get him to take pictures this week so I could use this. And so floor-to-ceiling windows that overlook their house. It's beautiful. It's serene. There's a fireplace, beautiful artwork. They're readers. They don't have technology in that room. It's called their whatsoever room. It's the whatsoever room of Philippians 4. Whatsoever is true, whatsoever is pure, whatsoever is noble. Think about such things. They've created space literally in their home, in their life, that they daily walk through to engage that. My aunt will tell you, when I don't want to think about the things of those, I take the other route to go upstairs. But there's space directly in their house that you walk through to engage that. What are those spaces in your life? Where are those physical spaces that you go to engage in peace and harmony? I've heard young moms say it before, I go into the bathroom and I lock the door and I'm not even going to the bathroom. I've heard young dads say, I'm going to go mow the lawn and do all the weeding and the hedging. And moms say, I'm going to join you. I've heard college students say, I'm just going to sleep a couple extra hours because I don't want to engage in this. What do we do to avoid that reality of what we need to do to find space and harmony? It's the beginning of 2021, or if I would say it's the beginning of a new year. This is often a word that I think of. I think of awe. We're at the start of it. We made it. Did anyone feel awe at the beginning of 2021? Would anyone resonate with that feeling of like, we're at a new year? Ethan's joyfully smiling. I don't know if there's anyone else that would join him in that. What are other words some of you might have thought of as we started a new year? Finally. Thank you. That's an excellent one. What was that? Yes. Hopeful. This past week, and we missed the timing of it, but a friend of mine, Carrie, they went to Florida and they took some time away this last couple weeks, and their son, who's 2, it's his first time at the ocean, so I was trying to get the picture from her, but she took a picture of him, his arms are up in the air, and he's staring at the ocean, so it's just the back of him, and I thought, that is awe. Like, we have no idea what's out there, but I'm ready for it. So Abram, arms wide up, ready to go, and I think that that's sometimes how we feel about it. At the same time, there is that finally moment of how we're here. What does this look like? How are we going to engage in this? And that's where today I want us to move deeper into that for understanding our own personal why. I don't know if you're like me. I feel like my roots have been exposed this last year. What am I rooted in? What's not going to grow? What is going to grow? What's going to become deeper? Deeply connected to the core of who I am is hospitality. I love to host meals. I love to be a part of meals. I love to celebrate meals. Love it. When the pandemic began in March of last year and I was starting to feel like, okay, things are shutting in, what does this look like to engage in that process? Quickly, I said, all right, got to navigate some other ways. We got to figure out how to stay connected to this and still be part of that. But there's that connection of how are my roots going to be exposed? Maybe for you, as you thought about last year, you're wondering what happened. Maybe some of your plants or your aloe plants have died. And you're thinking, how do I revitalize what feels lost? I want to remind us and claim over us this morning that we are people from the beginning, that God's intention for us was fruitfulness. Genesis 1:27, the very first thing. Adam and Eve are created, humankind is created to bear fruit and then multiply. Those are two separate things. When I was growing up, I thought it was have babies and work the land. That's what people are supposed to be doing. There's more of a lineup, so welcome to all of us. I don't have children, so I'm not being fruitful right now, technically, according to what the process looks like and sometimes our understanding of that. Here's a word of encouragement. How do your values bear fruit? Is this the outcome of what's happening for you and how you're living your life? When I realized last year that hospitality would need to look different, it became really clear that my neighborhood and the people that were around me, that would become a space where it consistently, what I was aware of who was around me, but we were gonna have to get creative. I have friends, I haven't been in their house for over a year now. We're going up on a year. I have other new friends, we found space to do that. How are we living in that space of saying, I'm still gonna find joy even when things feel taken away from me? As we think about the process of that, though, I want to encourage all of you, you have your own agency this morning to hold on to your value no matter what's happening around you. I didn't lose my love of hospitality as a value. How I did hospitality looks different. So I want to say that again. You have the agency to hold on to your value, to live out your value, and to be creative with your value, no matter what externally is coming at you. And this is because God created the earth to work in balance with each other. As we think about a three-legged stool, have you ever sat down in a chair and it's wobbling? Or a stool and you're wobbling? As children, I don't know why we love it. Maybe it's because there's this disdain to don't rock on your chair, you're gonna fall. But as we get older, there's not something about that that's oh, I just love it to be uneasy all the time. Let's just keep we'll probably keep going back to the finally comment. There's a lot connected to that for probably collectively. Finally, we have an opportunity to start again. But why does that matter? It's because balance matters. We're created in the intentionality and the image of balance. At the beginning of this last year, the school year, part of the work that I do, I oversee a team of about 17 people. And we went to spend time together, but COVID was still starting. We're in a university setting. How do we do this? I was like, we'll take our lawn chairs. I feel like lawn chair sales went up for a season, if everyone's outside. And I was like, oh, I've got a chair. This is great. We go outside. We go to Matter Park. We're downtown. We're about a half hour into our meeting. I was like, I think my chair has I think it's fraying near the edge. I was like, oh, I haven't used this for a while. So I'm sitting there trying to just hold it together. I am gripping my quads and just bracing myself because I'm at any moment I'm falling through my chair. And I literally, 10 of these people are brand new. I do not know them. I need them to trust me. And we're building a team. I'm let's go. keep taking breaks, and I'm like checking my chair. I'm like, I think it's gonna last. I finally just confessed. I said, you guys, my chair is gonna go at some point. Well, then I had the 2 people on my team that are like, oh no, what's gonna happen? I was like, no, I think it's fine, it'll last. All of a sudden, it just, like the seams on the side, it just goes. And I am like in the middle of the chair. I was like, okay, after an hour and a half of trying to hold it together, it just wouldn't work. But I think of that imagery so often with how we try to just hold it together. Like, it's gonna be fine, it's gonna be fine, it's gonna be fine. It actually will eventually, things disenfranchise themselves. We have to go back to the space of saying, I'm engaged with this process because I believe the triune God is created as 3 separate but connected. God, Jesus, and the Holy Spirit are 3 very separate parts of the Trinity, yet they are connected. If your values keep going deeper into who you are and to why you do what you do, you will have a deeper level of connection because that's what image we're created in. There's God, there's self, and others. God intended harmony with himself. God intended harmony with others as well as with ourselves. And out of this space, we create that space for other people. I remember a sermon years ago that Steve Deneff gave, and he was like, over here, like if Tamara's doing what Tamara is loving on the people around her and living out of the values, she's gonna bless Diana. Diana's doing her thing, and then she's gonna bless Silas. And out of these places, and she started naming people all over the sanctuary. And eventually you realize like, oh, who Tamara was offering her life to, actually she was receiving from Heather. It was no direct line. It was because she was living out her values in the collective nature. So I want you to think about today as we engage in this, is that your values are affecting your relationship with God, your relationship with others, and your relationship to self. Today, though, I'm asking that you think about yourself first and how you live out your values. We're connected to people. We're connected to supervisors, bosses, professors, children, spouses. There's other people that are connected to in that process. But what does it look like for you to believe this matters and it's connected in that? This last year, though, we have been more aware of what it means to be disconnected. I tried to Google how many times that word was Googled in the last 2 days. It was astronomical because it's consistently said, we're disconnected, we're disconnected, we're disconnected. People are disconnected from God and from themselves and from other people, and that is a problem. J.R. Briggs is a pastor in the Philadelphia area, and I'll talk about his book in a little bit, but he says that our posture and our incongruence affect how we live an embodied life. Our posture and our incongruence affect how we live an embodied life. God gave us the opportunity to live in these bodies and live here on earth to create harmony among each other and ultimately creating spaces of rest. In that space, though, we have to acknowledge we have individual work that needs to be done. We have spaces that we have let go. We have done things where we're like, I just have let it just fall away. And we need to say, hey, there's actually a way to be connected because that will bring us back to harmony. There's a lot of different ways to get there, though. How many of you remember or loved the paper maps or like atlases? Was anyone else really into those? I mean, I would sit in the backseat of my parents' minivan, always a minivan, and I would just pull it out and be like, where are we going? Even if it was in town, we had like local maps too. I always asked for like the Richland County, Ohio map to figure out which way. I was enthralled by it. My parents also would go back and forth. Oh, we're taking this way home. That was the key of like, I would take a different way. And as an adult now I realize there's so many different ways and so many different patterns. So even going back to our original slide, I want you individually today, my hope would be is that you walk away with a next step for yourself. And what do I want to do to move forward, to be connected in that process? Some people are going to be like, well, I just want words. I want the steps to do it. These are the most steps you're going to get from me probably today. Like this and this and this. Thank you, J.K. Smith or James K. Smith. So he's giving you, this is from one of his books as well, and he talks about some people will start with habits and practices. then that's going to move to desire, and then that's going to move into wisdom of a good life. So some of you are going to be like, okay, we could talk about habits, and what does this look like? For me, I'd actually probably flip those in different orders. All I'm going to tell you is these are 3 areas that you can engage in to think about this process. Some of you are going to be like, this year, I don't know if anyone feels like welcomed enough, or they want to say, this is one of my longings for this year. This is a value this year that I really want to do differently or grow in. Does someone have something? Or you've heard someone say something that they want to grow in this year? Or a habit they want to change, or a habit they want to grow in? Yes. It's amazing. Amazing. So curriculum writing for healthy habits for life. It's amazing. There's a lot of elements of that. So it sounds like there's already the desire there. What that process looks like, moving in that. Oh, I'm sorry, studying it. Maybe you'll write something with that too. So studying that. So there's space of that. So Tina's identifying, this is mentally some place in my life that I want to grow. So for some of you, that's going to be really healthy. I want us to pause before we even jump into that. And I want you to think about, but how are you as a person wired? So we're going to pause on values a second and move into that. Dave Drury used to work here at College Wesleyan Church. I worked with Dave when I was here for 3 years. Dave taught me something that I probably quote him on at least 2 times a week. Dave gave the concept, some of us are daily people, some of us are weekly people, some of us are monthly people, or seasonal people, or yearly people. So I'll break that down. There's people in this room that are like, every day I wake up at this time, I do this, and I do this. Whoever you are, bless you. I think of you often. That is not me. Some of you are weekly people. You're like, okay, so we're going to meal plan at the beginning of the week. We're going to work out this many times this week. We're going to do these things. I'm going to read this much. And if by Saturday I did it, then I'm going to feel really accomplished. Some of you might be monthly people. You're like, well, this month, you always love the first of the month because you're like, here we go. It's a new month. I have a chance to start over. This is the focus. I would probably fall more under the seasonal. So that would be like, hey, so it's winter. What am I going to engage in? What are the thoughts? What are the themes? What does that practice look like? For some people, it's yearly. How many people have heard of and or do this in your own life that you have a word of the year or a phrase of the year? I see some nodding heads. So some people function under that. Last year, my word was peace. I had no idea what that meant. It did show up daily, weekly, monthly, seasonally, but there's space in that. So this idea, if you can even think for just 10 seconds, what resonates with me, that will free you up a lot in how you understand your values and living them out. It will also alleviate a ton of pressure because for those of you who live in households with other people, you might not all be the same. So you might annoy each other or frustrate each other or misunderstand each other. Because if someone's in the house and they're like, we wake up at this time every day, we do this, and then someone else in the house is like, I'm a monthly person. You're lucky I got up this many, I woke up every day. That's a success. But as a society, when starts of New Year come, we get to this point of well, this is celebrated. Everyone should clean out their closets during COVID. We had so much time during quarantine. I'm not going to ask how many of you or us cleaned out our closets during that time that we had to be at home. Maybe that's what some of us needed to do. But we're going to give pressure to other people and ourselves if we live in that reality. Are there any comments or questions on that idea? Because this is really significant. I hope you take away this energy and freedom for yourself because it's going to really affect how you live out your value. Yes. Sure. So my friend Brent in college was a daily person. Every day Brent would read his Bible, work out, and do homework. He said, if I do those 3 things every day, I've had a good day. I'm like, if I worked out 3 times this week, that's good. And I'll do my homework when I do my homework. Or it could be a monthly person who says, hey, this month we need to look at our budget. I need to get these 4 things done. I want to read this many chapters of this book. I want to work, or maybe I want to lose 3 pounds this month. I want to meal plan half the time. So it's kind of functioning within your framework. Now, if I lived that way and said, okay, Brent, work out like 15 times-ish, he would not do well. He'd be like, no, I need to work out every day. I need to read my Bible every day, and I need to do my homework every day. I'm like, well, I think about the Bible every day. I don't like read it every day, but sometimes I do read it every day. He's like, no, you have to read the Bible every day. We used to go back and forth about those things. So it's the tension of that, of maybe how you structure your time would be some of that. Okay, yes? Oh, 100%. 100%. She asked, do I think that people who are in different groups think they do it better? Different. 100%. We could debate. That could be another Elevate that Ethan can ask Dave to come teach on. But that will offer you compassion for yourself and others in your life if you can think about this and how your values might feel like they're colliding with each other rather than helping enhance each other. Okay, so I'm going to jump through a couple more pieces before we get into identifying our values, and then that's how we'll spend the second portion of our time. So I want you to think individually about this, and this is for you to navigate and thinking about body, heart, and mind. So I use Brent as an example. That would fit into that category, those 3 things that he wanted to do every day. We're body people. We're embodied people. Our bodies matter. Some seasons, we have to focus on our body more. If you've ever broken your foot in winter, you are thinking about your body differently because you're thinking about being on the ice in the winter. Your heart. What are you doing to know your feeling, your emotion, your connection with others, the soul part of who you are? And then your mind, how are you challenging yourselves and growing intellectually? Luke 1:27 talks about this, that God said, love the Lord your God with all of your heart, soul, mind, and strength. This space of how do we again find balance? Here's another image for it. This might resonate more of how do they actually blend together. William Irvin is a philosopher, and he talks about you might not be able to control things, but you can have agency and let there be a blending of those things. Because when your values overlap each other, it's way easier to feel like you've merged them and you're doing well in that. When I'm thinking about hospitality, I'm thinking about gathering with people. Well, I can't do that in the same way. Well, how does that actually show up, though, in the way that I'm thinking about who's around me? I've had neighbors who moved this year into the same apartment complex. How can I think about that? Well, I can't bring them food because they're new and I don't know how they feel about COVID. I can ask them, do you want me to have pizza delivered or do you want me to bring bread? There's room for that. My grocery list looks different because I can celebrate and offer differently based on dropping off food. I'm more aware of different needs in that process. When they blend together, then I'm not like, oh, I'm grocery shopping. Grocery shopping is like, oh my gosh, I'm going to go grocery shop because this is going to be part of this because I still want to let this align with my value. So letting those blur. The word for the blurring is called mandorla, and that's the Italian word for almond. And it's the merging, or when 2 things blend. And you might think, they don't really go together. You want another resource? We can talk about this at the end, but Sacred Rhythms is what this book is called by J.R. Briggs. The overlap can feel opposite, but it's connected. Jesus wept. Jesus went to parties. Jesus fed 5,000. Jesus had a meal with one person. There's overlap, okay? So there's things that they feel like, maybe this doesn't go together. I'm convinced that today, we're going to narrow it down for each of you, or you're going to narrow it down in your own life for 2 of your values. We'll figure out how they can overlap. Something I started last year doing that felt really significant to helping me in this process was an idea of 20-20-20. I wasn't doing it because it was 2020, but it became 20 minutes thinking about mind, 20 minutes thinking about body, 20 minutes thinking about heart. That's how I think about my structure of my day or my process. Because every day, research will show you that mindfulness or thinking or just being still for 20 minutes can reset your nervous system. That's really challenging. So I'd be like, okay, 20 minutes is not that long. I don't even know where my phone is. And I'd turn my phone on, a timer, and I'd set it down and be like, 20 minutes, go. And I'd be like, I am 100% bored. It's got to be 20 minutes, almost 20 minutes. Like 17 minutes left? I'm like, you have to be kidding me. There's research that will show that even in spiritual practices that there's a space for that you can say, Holy Spirit, let me think of the things I need to think of and the things I need to let go of. Let me not remember. Well, then I was like, well, I'm not going to remember things. So I'm going to keep a note. So I would keep lists while my 20 minutes were happening. Slowly by the end of the year, I would just start finding myself craving that 20 minutes. It wasn't always exactly 20. Those of you in the room that are like, no, it has to be 20. This might frustrate you. Pick 777 or something. There's a space for that. There's an emptying. There's a calming. I would let my heart be where it was. Mentally, I love listening to the news. I don't actually even have a TV at my house because I don't watch TV that much, but I listen to things a lot. So I started finding myself like, oh, I'll engage in different news sources multiple times. A lot of the times that was how I was challenged mentally. And then 20 minutes of working out or movement. That's way more freeing for my personality than like, I'm going to go run for 20 minutes. Like, oh, it's going to take me 20 minutes to get warm enough to bundle up and then go. But if I contained it, there's space for that. Some of you might be like, ugh, just forget that slide. For some of you, it might be helpful for that. As we enter into this space, and this is going to be then right before our break, I started caring about this because I asked the question, actually when I was in college, someone asked me this question, what does it look like for me when I am 70 years old and people pass my house and they say, this is who Julia is? What are people saying behind my back about who I am because they just know that's true of who she is? My neighbors that live near me, I can tell you the people that go on walks at certain times of the day. I can walk past and be like, I know who that is, and she's out and she's going to garden, and she has beautiful gardens. I might not even really know much about them beyond that, but I've seen their rhythms. Who do you want to be when you fill in your blank on whatever age? Who do you want people to know you for or be talking about you behind your back, quote unquote? And I say that in a positive light, not in a gossipy way. Who do you want to be in that place? So again, I'm going to ask that, I think it's Ella and Jessica are going to pass out papers. I'm going to ask as they're passing out those papers to again remind you of this image of God, self, and others. What you decide are your values. And again, there's not pressure today to leave with like, these are my 2 values. But I want you to think about that of how they affect others in your relationship, as well as your relationship to self. But I want you to begin with yourself. So what's being passed out now is a list by Brene Brown from her Dare to Lead. Brene is a researcher in psychology, social sciences, and she has created this list. There are a lot of lists. And if you're like, well, my value is, I don't even think hospitality is on that list. My value is this. Don't feel turned off to like, she didn't say it's not a value, so it's not. It can be your value. I want you to go through and I want you to read through the list and I want you to circle anything that sticks out to you of like, yeah, I value this, I value this, I value this. Just read through, give yourself grace. You might, circle 17 things. And then what I want you to do is I want you to go back and read it another time. So we're going to do this 3 times and hopefully get you down to like maybe a couple, and then we're going to take a break. So go ahead and read through the list. I'm going to give you 2 minutes, so don't spend tons of time thinking about it, to do this whole process. So I'm going to give you 30 seconds, read, circle whatever comes up, and then we'll go through it one more time again after that. So 30 seconds, anything that connects to you. Okay, that's 30 seconds. I'm going to have you do another 30 seconds. You might still be reading. That's okay. Some of you are really frustrated with me right now. You're like, you're not giving us enough time. You're getting ready to go into a break. You'll have some space if you want to keep thinking about it. Go through a second time and maybe rectangle or, mark the next group, hone it in a little bit more at the next time. Okay, now I'm going to ask everyone to turn your paper over so you can't see the list. And for 10 seconds, 10 or 15 seconds, I'll just mentally count. I'm going to ask you to just think, okay, am I willing to be open to think about this specific season of my life or this specific time of my life? What are the things? Because some of you are like, if I don't value this, I don't know if I'm a follower of Jesus. I can't say I'm not this because I'm this. This isn't what this time is for. What are you hoping for this specific season? In this workbook that Brene has, she'll say, pick 2. If you think of more than 2 values, you'll forget them, essentially is her essence. I'm going to give you space. You can let that be what you want it to be. But I'm going to ask us in the next 10 to 15 seconds, just for you internally with God, to be able to be like, what am I open to in this next space of my life of, being identified of a value that I have? So not to feel overwhelmed, whatever feels pressure of I need to be all of these. Just take a deep breath. And then we'll come back one more time. So just take a few seconds of stillness for yourself. So as I was just speaking with one of the people that are here today, he introduced me to a word that I would love to encourage you all to even hear and engage in. It's the word cogitate, to make sure I'm saying this correctly. And the idea of this was a Western concept of when the cowboys would come back at the end of the day, they'd be in front of the fire and they would just have time to be. Things merging together, so to cogitate. So we're having that conversation and I'm thinking, I want to encourage you, let yourself see these things merge together. Let there be space for you to see where they can overlap. So I'm going to give you one of mine as an example, and then if one of you wants to volunteer, we'll be happy to engage with you about one of yours. We can kind of talk through, hey, how does this practically play out? What questions to ask around that? So if one of you feels hey, I actually would like to be able to have a conversation and you're willing to share your value, we can talk about that. But I'll share with you one of mine just to give you an example of this. So for this next season of my life, in the space that I'm in, actually I should go back. So creativity would be one of mine. Okay, so I want to grow in that. Feels it's part of my life. I deeply value it. How do I keep doing it? Good News Movement. How many of you follow Good News Movement on? I feel I'm there. I'm subliminally advertising for them. Every day I laugh or I have tears in my eyes based on something they post. I find it so endearing. So this is a picture you can clearly see, but there's a kid who was quarantined. This is back in spring of last year. And he was about to miss his school day picture. And so the whole class came, and so you can see him sitting in his, on his porch. That's creative. That also is inclusive. Okay, so how do we merge some of these? So inclusivity would be another one of mine. How do I think about my day and offer creativity when I'm being told I have to there's limitations? We've received so many limitations. Ethan has coined this wonderfully in how he does church emails, but adherence doesn't always mean agreement. I also work in higher ed this semester. I'm the interim director of residence life, so I'm working with 1,800 students who don't want to adhere to things at times. You don't have to agree. There's some things I need you to adhere to. How do I be creative in talking about what that looks like? Someone at work said, well, our students get put in quarantine. They'll have to stay in the residence hall because they don't have symptoms. What do? They're trying to find loopholes to get out. One of my employees this week said that to me. I said, actually, I think what the student is trying to figure out is how do I stay healthy and can I go on a walk or a run and still be in quarantine? It's not a loophole. We got to be creative in how we reframe this. Okay? So that's one of mine. That's an example. Values. Trying to help you guys hone in on that. Does someone want to volunteer to say, hey, we can all be, not a case study, but you're willing to say, hey, this is the value I want to grow in. Let's collectively talk about it and brainstorm for this person. Someone want to offer a value that they're trying to grow in or develop further in. Okay, Abby, thank you. Health. Okay, so if any other questions, you can be like, I don't want to answer this. But so Abby's is health. That's what, is this a season? Is this the year? What's your kind of time frame? Okay, so this is for the year. Abby's thinking about health. Abby, why does health matter to you? Okay. Okay, so Abby's thinking about everything else and not that. She said it takes a back seat. Why is health important in the kingdom of God for you in that process? Why do you think this matters on a spiritual level? Okay, amazing. Really quick, let me pause for a second. Is there any way we can have the handheld microphone? I don't know where that is. Let's see, because I could just have Abby speak for herself. I mean, I can translate as well. That's true. That's great. That's great. So I'm going to ask Abby to say it again so you can all hear from her words rather than me synthesizing what Abby's saying. Okay.
I was saying health is important to me because I've been learning a lot about the theology of the body and that we have been given a physical body to be in connection with the Lord, but also in community, and it is a way for us to worship, blah, 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 blah. But that always takes a backseat for me because I'm caring about a million other things.
Okay. So Abby is acknowledging, this is not staged either, by the way, so we've not talked about this. I'm going to go back to this structure. So Abby is talking about her health, and she's talking about her body in the context of this matters to God because we are embodied people. Abby, I'm curious if you could say anything on a heart level, and you can literally talk about like the beats of your heart, or you can talk about like the emotive level of your heart, the emotion, what's connected to that for you about your health that you're thinking about as you think about your values.
Okay. Say that again. My heart, like how I feel physically or also emotionally in my heart?
I mean, some people, I've had people say to me, hey, Julia, I really want to work on my health this year because I want my resting heart rate to be this number. So it literally could be like my literal physical beating heart. Someone was trying to convince me to buy an Apple Watch for multiple reasons, but they said, I like it because it tells me when to breathe. Mm-hmm. That's part of your heart. Thank you, Ethan. We'll just give kudos to Ethan on that. It can also be the heart of the emotion of it. Like, I actually, like, this feels like I want to, how you feel emotionally about thinking about your health.
Yeah, so both, actually. I would say, so in 2020, we're talking about like a zoom out of perspective. We're like isolated. And I was like, this is my year to be healthy. But then the reality is I'm still caring for so many people around me and a community. And so I don't love working out or eating well. I love gathering and food and experiences go with that. So for me, my heart feels joyful when I'm caring for others and not when I'm working out because I don't like it. But I am aware that I have become unhealthy, both physically in my heart and even my dear friend Heather and I do coffee once a week. And it is like the one thing in my heart that I like love. I mean, since COVID started, we've done it. We meet outside on her porch and it's like, forget anything about my body or my mind. It's like my heart moment to be physically with her 6 feet apart on her porch. So I don't know that I answered that, but
Yep. That's great.
Okay.
That's great. Thank you. And again, I'm not going to put words into Abby's mouth because all of us, if we have our value written down, there's things in us that come up when we think about these things. There's going to be things that we could engage further in. If we're going to engage in the process of literally Abby saying like, I physically want to be present, we are really aware of what it means to not be present with people like we've known. And maybe some of you are like, I've thrown COVID to the wind. I'm still with people the same. That's a decision. That's okay. There's other things like a year ago at this time, we weren't going to Meijer and putting masks on. I have a friend who has cancer and she said, yeah, it's kind of nice. Now everyone looks like me. She's been wearing masks for the last few years. Okay, so some of those contexts of what it brings up in us. So whatever yours is, it might bring up things in you that you're like, hey, I actually have neglected that. And that's okay. There's space to acknowledge that. And if there's space that we need to repent in that, we can. There's times in my own creativity, the last thing I want to do is be creative with working out in the middle of winter if I was going to talk about health. Like, are you kidding me? No, thank you. Okay, if creativity is a value, if health's a value, how do I merge into those? So thank you, Abby, for acknowledging that. Abby's even acknowledging, hey, one of the things that brings the most life to me is her time with Heather. She wants to physically be present with her in that process. And then mentally, is there anything, Abby, that you're like, I'm thinking about this with my health that I want to, because it sounds like you're doing reading around it. So are there other things that are connected to that for you?
Well, I think for me, when I think about health as a society, we think about body image. And ultimately, like, I've really been able to set that aside. Like, I'm not talking about a scale number or a size number. I'm talking about like actual physical health. And we have had conversations about like, there's been so much growth for me, and there's a pruning in that is really healthy and good. So maybe just even having a better mental perspective over what health means. It's not even a physical thing for others to see. It's totally an internal process for me.
That's amazing. That's amazing. So Abby's even acknowledging, it sounds like she's been on this journey for a little while. This isn't just like all of a sudden like 2021, ready, set, health. Like sounds like it's been part of the trajectory for her in that process. I'm curious if anyone else has a question about, as we're navigating, or you think about your value that we put into this conversation, something that doesn't feel clear to you in that or could feel helpful. And again, we're all here today because we're asking questions about this. This is not a mandatory class, so it's really lovely that no one has to be here. Okay, so your hand first, and then we'll go to Jana. Yes. Yep. So the question, remind me of your name again. Anastasia. Oh, sorry, I forgot your name. Anastasia is asking, so if there's like, so health, what does that mean for like one specific person? Or, like how do we narrow that down or hone in to one person? We all need to ask ourselves the question of what does that look like for me in this next season? We were talking about this in our conversation of the sense of like probably about 7 or 8 years ago, I started having a rash all up my arm. We could not figure out what was going on. I mean, long story short, I found out it was like some kind of dairy something. I mean, I still can eat dairy now, but it was just this bizarre whatever. For me, when that meant health, it had nothing to do with working out. It had nothing to do. It was literally like, this is seeping up my arm. What is happening? And that began a different health journey. So I think it's asking yourself the question of like, why am I doing this? Like, why am I trying to get to? What am I trying to get to? How am I willing to get it? Use that golden circle to hone in of why does this matter? For Abby, she was honing in on saying, this matters because I recognize my body. Like, there's something embodied about the theology of how God sees my body. Her next step of how am I going to do this? Well, it sounds like she's asking questions around how am I going to do this with like, I want to still be with people, but it's not like, hey, let's fast for the next year whenever you're with me. Like, okay, well, how do I healthfully engage in what that process looks like? Is that fair? Okay, so it could be just like a how of what, and then a what. It's gonna be like, oh my gosh, this year I'm going to, subscribe to a blog that's all about fruit parties or something. I don't know. I'm choosing fruit as like, but like maybe that's something that she's going to expand in that in that category. So it's processing through for yourself, what's my goal? Or if it's like, hey, I want to lose 10 pounds. Well, that step's going to look different. Why do I want to lose 10 pounds? Because I literally, my friend Brandon, he doesn't live anywhere near us, but Brandon a couple of months ago said to me, he's like, I don't have money to buy new clothes. I have to lose 10 pounds. So Brandon's on that path of what that looks like. So honing it in for yourself, what's my end goal? And not even, because you're going to feel like a failure every time if you set yourself up for Abby's goals. Because it's not yours. Is that helpful? Okay, Jana? Yep. Jana's asking the question of, so if I focus on, so say she said, you said health. So say if I focus on health, that might take me away from my family a little bit more, but then I want to grow in this, so how do I do that? Is that accurate? I think that's where some of the layering that we can be reminded of again. as we think about this, things are going to layer on top of each other. Has anyone ever painted the shutters on your home? Paula is raising your hand. Paula, when you painted the shutters the second time or third time, did you sand it down all the way to the start and start over? The second time. Okay. Kept covering more and more. So she's building on that. Maybe this isn't the right analogy to use, but we don't always have to go back to like clear everything to start over. We can keep building on what's there. Some of that's also going to be, how do I build on that with my family? Like, okay, because if we do if it's 2 hours of time that we're spending away, that might be too much. So how do we move it back? So the 20-20-20 is 20 minutes, 20 minutes, 20 minutes. Again, this is not like formulaic. That worked for me because it kept me in like health of that. It could be, hey, if I'm going to take away from my family, I'm doing this because I can actually be more present with my family. There's a great book called Burnout. It's by 2 women who are psychologists. We're talking about health in a couple different ways. But she talks about completing the stress cycle. Like you actually working out or you doing anything with your body is completing a stress cycle, which gives you more rest. So reframing some of that versus like, oh, I'm just not happy with my clothes, to, oh, this is actually helping me complete this process. So yes, your values could take away, you feel like it's taking away from what you had been doing. Some of that's like we have to break some cycles though too. Okay, this is another one. I am using this as another imagery. Some people, this is helpful to have this. One of my others for this season, specifically this season, I currently am doing 2 full-time jobs and because of how it blended with my job this semester. So I chose perseverance. This feels like how I need to think about work. Like, I got a lot of things to manage. That's okay. I'm not willing to give up these other things. So when I took on these roles, I also put boundary around that and said, nope, this is not part of it. So one being, I'm not on call on the weekends. For anyone who's connected to a residential experience, there's always that person that's like the person that's on call. That was supposed to be my job from January 1st to June 1st. I said, I'll take on this extra job if I'm not on call on the weekends. So I create a system, other people are on call on the weekends. It's great, it helps me reset, but this is perseverance. So maybe some imagery might be helpful for you of like, okay, I'm gonna have to do a lot of different things. How are we gonna navigate that? I know we're closing in on our time, so I wanna be aware of that. This goes a little bit to what Jana was talking about. This is the Mackinaw Bridge. Has anyone been to Mackinaw, Michigan? This bridge was built over a 4-year period of time. It's about 5 miles long. I think building a bridge in the middle of water is just fascinating. Like, how does this happen? This to me feels like us building bridges for our values. How is this even possible? I don't understand how people can drive on it. I don't understand how it still lasts. I also don't understand, literally there's people that their entire job is to paint the bridge. It takes an entire year. So they start at one end, go to the next, and it takes them a year to go back and forth to paint the bridge. So I was thinking about, Jana, when you're talking of like, we're building on we're building on things. Okay? Over time, it's going to be part of it. There's some things that probably 10 years ago, if I ask you, how did you ever learn how to do that? You're like, oh, that's so a part of my life. I never even think anymore about it. And some of that might be a space for you to celebrate. If you're like, this feels so overwhelming, think of where you were 10 years ago. Think of something you've learned how to do. You're like, I don't know, how did I learn how to do that? Does someone have an example of like 10 years ago, I didn't even know how to do fill in the blank, and now I don't even think about doing this? Yes. Bless you. That is amazing, and we bless you for that. That is a skill I do not have, and so thank you for even teaching yourself that. So that's it. Didn't know how to do it. How am I doing it now? How many of you think every day about brushing your teeth? Like, oh, I've got to remember how to brush my teeth. Things become I hope they're regular parts of your life. Okay, you'll probably never hear me talk ever or be in conversation without talking to you, though, about what does it look like when this doesn't work well? What does it look like when there's limitations that are put on you? You encounter something that is outside of your control. I'm going to talk about grief for a few minutes. because sometimes things just don't work. I was a junior in college, and I'd had back problems since I was 14 years old. Went to Indiana Wesleyan and had not told people around me. I was just like, okay, just do your back problems. You got to figure this out. I was in pain all the time. My junior year, I ended up, my disc finally ruptured in my lower back is what ended up finally being the culmination of all these years of back problems. I had to go home early. I had to take incompletes for the semester. I was supposed to go to Australia that May for May term. And I was supposed to work that summer. I had plans to work at a camp that summer, or it was church. I was kind of working between the two of them. All my friends were working at camps that summer. It was kind of that we're juniors, we're going to be seniors next year. That energy was there. I had to leave college early. I was in student leader as well. And that summer I had back surgery where they fused discs together in my lower back. At this point, I'm 21 years old. And every doctor I had seen, they said, we see this in older people. You're too young. I hadn't had a specific accident. We're not really even sure the trajectory of that. What I will tell you though is that summer, after back surgery, I literally had to sit on a wooden chair because I couldn't sit on comfortable chairs. Well, it didn't feel comfortable, for 6 weeks. And I couldn't bend from the waist down. I'm 21 years old, thinking I'm getting ready to be I'm a senior, I'm leaving to do this thing. I'm preparing to be an adult. I'm at my parents' home, and I cannot really do much for myself. My sister, who's a year and a half younger than me, right after I came home from surgery, she was like, I guess I'm going to have to shave your legs. And I was just like, I feel so, incapable. It's it's supposed to be one of the primes of my life, supposedly. That summer, though, everyone in my family worked. They all, disseminated every day to do their thing. I would drop things all over the house all day long. You don't realize how much you drop things until you can't pick them up. I remember the first day my mom coming back and she started laughing. She's like, what happened? I'm yeah, I dropped things. And it wasn't like I shattered things. It'd be like you're walking and you drop a book and you're like, well, guess we'll wait on that. So it became throughout that process, it kind of became this place of we found some joy in it, but I literally sat on a chair for 6 weeks. That is the summer though that I look back on and I think I learned to love reading that season of my life, because at the end of that summer, I counted because someone had said, you feel like you read a lot this summer. I had read 25 books that summer. I might be like, oh, right, we heard you have your doctorate. No. I had a learning disability in elementary school, could not comprehend what I was reading. Super, super slow reader. Came to college on hey, probation, you have to take this special class. Whatever that class was, I wish I could remember the professor. I wish I would have taken that when I was in kindergarten, because it would have helped me understand speed reading as well as understanding and comprehension. That summer was the summer that I would tell you I learned to love to read. Am I really happy that happened so I learned to love reading? No. A byproduct of that summer was, though, I learned to love reading in a different way. There's going to be grief connected to what we value. I never want to underplay that. There are things that our bodies are deteriorating in, our minds, our relationships, outside of our control, that we need to create space to grieve. So please give yourself compassion, give others compassion. If in 2 weeks, Abby is singing on a Sunday morning and I see her in a boot because she broke her ankle, say, this is not prophesying over her that this is going to happen. There will be a part of me that will lament that, and we'll have to say, hey, what does that look like to engage in understanding of health, even with feeling really reminded of that? So please give yourself room to grieve. Give yourself room to acknowledge, hey, this might not go as I intended, and there's room for that. I'm going to close today with an image of something I think is beautiful when I think about the word harmonizing, and that was one of the key words of what we talked about. This is my friend Kyle. This is from a few years ago. He was doing a concert, but Kyle can play guitar and use the harmonica at the same time, and every time I've seen him in concert, I'm just fascinated. These two things do not go together. I'm not even really, I can sing, but I'm not musical, and I'm I don't even understand, but you're doing this so well. Each of you in this room are doing things already that you're doing so well that don't seem to go together. Abby shared with vulnerability that she loves to be with people. At the same time, she's trying to engage health. Those might feel opposing right now. They're really inviting. And there's a merging that's going to happen in that process. And there's really beautiful harmony that's going to come from that. So for those of you resourcing people, there's some books I quoted. Designing Your Life is going to give you more practical worksheets. For those of you who are like, I really wanted to come today, I'm super disappointed she didn't give us worksheets. Designing Your Life. Very Good Life, we'll talk about gathering, spaces of shalom. And then An Altar in This World is Barbara Brown Taylor's book. And it will talk about the reality that they're sacred everywhere we go. And her whole premise is she hopes that our knees get bruised because we're bumping into the sacred wherever we are. So this slide is for those of you who love the resourcing. I'm going to close today and read something to you, a blessing as we think about, did anyone need, we can talk afterwards if you need to get a picture from that. A blessing for each of you in this process. As I said at the beginning, I'm doing this, I care about this, I'm talking about this because I really do believe we belong together. I believe that God intended us as image bearers of the Trinity. We affect each other. How I live is affecting you. You're affecting me. We're affecting one another to bring the kingdom of God to earth. And out of that place, Jesus consistently throughout Scripture, and specifically in the New Testament, would talk about taking communion as a place of gathering at the table, as a place to remember, a place to reflect and repent, as well as to celebrate. And that's what I hope for each of us in our values that we can do and that we can gather in those spaces to find that together. So I'm going to have you can close your eyes or you can keep your eyes open, but I'm going to read a blessing for us as we close. So God, we acknowledge that connection has been the essence of meaningful belonging, and that's been from the beginning. That the divine is present and ready to transcend the space at the table. For now, there's a number of tables that are before us here in this community. So may we forfeit our lives of isolation and choose to live embodied with grace amidst the perceived chaos with one another. May we be fruitful people, and may we have the grace to be the fruitful people even among all of the chaotic and out of control things in this world. May we be people of peace who live on this earth. Amen.